We hope she makes it full refuah. Kevin's going to start off teaching us because I don't have the strength to start off. I'm still thinking.
Okay, so I've just found something about davening, and just something different. I'll go back to the. Okay, I'll go back to what I was doing in Chop and Change. So okay, so I found something interesting. I haven't had a chance to look over it about davening alone. Okay, so it says when you daven alone, when you just one thing before I proceed. Um, when you daven, you're supposed to have kavana up till the Hakei Kadosh, the first that brocha. So what a good technique! And I learned this from a chap, Gedalia Fenster. I listen to his podcast often. He's the top Breslov guy in the English speaking world, based in the States. If you want to switch off and focus, you breathe. If you take a breath, you won't think of anything else. Your mind will be clear for that split second or few seconds. That's I've tried this actually at davening, and it actually works. If you just concentrate on your breathing, it'll block out other thoughts. So just a tip anyway. I don't know what works for you guys. So basically, obviously it says with davening, ideally it's better to be in a minyan. Firstly, it's all the prayers are counted, and and you need a minyan for someone to kaddish and to do baruch hu, and I'm not sure about the Torah reading, but it's a good thing to do. It's like 10 is a community, and yeah, kedusha obviously can't be said, and kaddish. What else? I'm just trying to see here. And it says an individual's prayers are only accepted when they're accompanied with proper kavana. So if you're in a minyan, I mean, I haven't read what's written here. In a minyan, there might be just a bit more leniency because you're together, you're forming like a community, and it's a much more stronger. So one has to try and have more kavana if you're davening by yourself. So I think let's leave it at that. Anything, if I've said anything wrong, please correct me. Gavin and Damon?
Now I'm still reeling over the shock of the
Was this quite taxing for you, Damon, what I just said, or not?
yeah, it was
not as taxing as earlier. Yeah, that's for sure. And also the one advantage of davening in a minyan is how you're going to get that stock tip and find out what's happening.
Yes, yeah. No, but that's they do that outside shul. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's a benefit.
Yeah. All right, so let's get started,
Okay.
guys. Hang on a second. I've got to plug in my cell phone and wind up the power. And you know what it reminds me of is that they got Back to the Future when they went back to the Wild West. And they had those generators that you had to wind up. Welcome to South Africa. All right, guys. So, why are you laughing? We're living in it.
Arthur, stop it now, Arthur.
No, I'm just picturing, you've got somebody in your house on a pedal bike. It's a generator.
All right, so guys, let me tell you where we were at. Rav Papa was holding that the discussion was different to Rav Zavid. Because Rav Zavid was saying that Rav Yehuda said that the stolen animal is returned as it is, and he gets to keep the benefits of the byproduct. And Rabbi Shimon said something that sounded similar, is that we view it as if it was an article appraised and placed with him according to the cash value at the time of the robbery. So what's the difference between them is that according to Rabbi Zavid, they're arguing with respect to improvements that are still attached to the stolen article. In other words, In the case of the Bryce itself, when the robber shared the ewe or the cow gave birth, there's no difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. They both agree that the robber acquires the shorn or born calf through the physical change of the byproducts, and the robber only pays the prior value at that particular stage of hair growth or pregnancy. And what's the point at which they argue? It's when it's still attached to the animal, because Rabbi Yehuda holds, according to Rav Zavid, that they belong to the one who was robbed, meaning the victim, if it's still attached to the animal. In other words, if it wasn't pregnant and now it's pregnant, it goes back to the original owner, or the hair growth was thin and now the ewe's wool is worth something. If it's still on the animal, it goes back to the original owner. And we said yesterday that we think that the court would probably seize the animal at that stage because the thief would want to quickly shave the animal, pull out the fetus to get to keep it. Rabbi Shimon holds, according to Rav Zaved, that they belong to the robber. In other words, is that whether it was attached to the animal or detached, that physical change is significant in the animal, and therefore that entire animal with the benefits go to the robber, and the robber only has to make financial restitution for the amount at the time of the robbery. Rav Papa's got a different opinion. He says that all agree, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, that even improvements that are actually still attached to the stolen article belong to the robber. So what he's saying is that he doesn't hold like Rav Zavid that if it's still attached to the stolen article, it goes back to the victim. He's saying, Rav Papa, that Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon both agree that any improvement attached to the animal belongs to the robber. But they're arguing as to whether or not the robber takes the entire improvement, or only a half, a third, or a quarter. So this is where Rav Papa is opposite. Because he says Rabbi Yehuda holds that improvements that are still attached to the stolen article belong entirely to the robber, meaning he's more for the robber, according to Rav Papa, whereas Rav Zavid said he's more for the victim. But Rabbi Shimon holds that the robber doesn't take the entire share, but only gets to keep a certain amount of profitability in the improvement, which is a half, a third, or a quarter. So how come they're such different amounts? Because each community has a custom of what they would compensate the robber as though he were a customary guardian and looked after the animal, and the animal improved, and there was an improvement. And therefore it takes profit off that improvement, but that improvement, as far as Rabbi Shimon concerned, belongs mainly to the victim, which is different to Rav Zavid, who said it all belongs to the robber. So that's where we see Rav Papa. So the Gemara says, hang on a second, that we learnt in our Mishnah, if one stole a cow and it became pregnant while it was being held by him and it gave birth, or an ewe and it became laden with wool while it was being held by him and he shared it, pays as at the time of robbery. So what does that actually mean? Is that he returns only the stolen cow and ewe, and returns he basically returns it in its non-pregnant state, or the ewe in its shaved state, and he gets to keep the calf and the wool for himself, and he doesn't have any sort of amount that he has to give back to the original owner as far as that's concerned, but he gets to keep basically all of the improvements, apart from at the time of the robbery. We're saying when there's an improvement from the time of robbery to the court date. At that point, that the thief gets to keep it. So it seems to contradict Rav Papa. So Gemara says, well, how would Rav Papa answer it? So it implies, yes, if it gave birth, he acquires the calf, but if it didn't give birth, he returns it to the original owner while it's carrying the fetus. Now, that's well according to Rav Zavid. Why? Because he says the improvements that are still attached to the stolen article belong to the one that was robbed. So that's according to Rabbi Yehuda. And then we say, so therefore there's no problem as far as that's concerned with our Mishnah. But we're saying it's a Mishnah authored by Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Rav Papa, who says that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, the improvements, if they're still attached to the stolen article, belong to the robber. It kind of is difficult because whose authorship is reflected in the Mishnah? It's not authored by Rabbi Yehuda nor by Rabbi Shimon. Why? Because the Mishnah, guys, implies that the attached wool or unborn fetus is returned to the original owner, if it's still attached. Now, in a case where it's unattached, it obviously stays with the... So that doesn't accord with Rav Papa's explanation of Rabbi Yehuda saying it belongs entirely to the robber if it's still attached. It doesn't accord with Rabbi Shimon, who says that the robber only retains a portion. Because it would seem that if it was attached, then that would go according to the victim. So we can see that our Mishnah, Rav Papa would have to explain how it works. So I've just got birds chirping in the background. They're very happy, happier than me. Rav Papa would say to you, although the Mishnah states that the robber keeps the fetus or the wool that developed while the animal was in his possession, it's only respect to where the animal gave birth or was shorn. Why, guys? Because there's a difference, according to Rav Papa, between when it's attached and when it's detached. So when it's attached, as far as he's concerned, it's a different principle than when it's detached. When it's detached, it belongs to the robber in its entirety. Okay? And it's saying, well, how would you answer it? The same applies even if it didn't give birth, wasn't shorn. The robber pays only at the time of the robbery and keeps the unborn fetus and the unborn fetus and the unshorn wool for himself. So the Mishnah states this law. The robber is saying that he acquires what has been developed. But it's only in the case that the Mishnah brings that when there's detachment. So how would Rav Papa answer that? Well, he answers it in a very, very simple way. He says, look, the only reason that it mentions the detachment process is simply because it had to show that there was symmetry and to teach the principle that for physical change, that the robber acquires it. It couldn't have shown that physical change if it's still attached to the animal, because the animal hasn't changed significantly. In other words, if it's a non-pregnant animal and it has a slight bump, or it's a ewe and it's got a bit of hair growth, that's not a physical significant change to affect acquisition for the robber. But in a case where it's detached and the fetus now becomes a calf, they're two different entities. That physical change from being in the mother's womb to being an independent living animal, or to have completely shorn wool from nothing, is that physical change that affects acquisition for the robber. The robber would only have to pay the cash value. Okay? So the law would still be consistent, but it has to illustrate the point. So fine, we've got support now for Rav Papa's understanding, because it was taught in a brisa, that which accords with the opinion of Rabbi Papa, and it says, Rab Shimon says, we view it as if it was appraised in cash and placed by him for a half, a third, and a quarter. So this concept that Rav Papa has, that as Gavin suggested, that perhaps the robber should be compensated for the time and money in fattening up the animal or making sure it was well looked after, is founded by Rabbi Shimon, who said he should be treated as a shomer, and it's not that he doesn't have to pay back the animal, but he pays back the animal at the time of the robbery. But if there's improvements, the original owner gets the improvements, but he has to share a certain portion with the robber, who could have ended up giving the animal malnourishment, and then there would have been a problem. So he gets paid either a half, a third, or a quarter as a custodian, depending what the rule is in that town. So Rav Ashi said, when we were studying in the academy of Rav Kahana, we inquired, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the robber takes only a half, a third, or a quarter, when we remove him from the improvements, we have to satisfy his claim, right? and we have to pay him a share to which he's entitled because he improved the animal. So how do we actually pay him back? Do we remove him from his obligation of the actual article with money? Or perhaps he takes his share from the meat of the unborn calf itself, or the wool from the total amount of wool. So what we're saying is, can the original owner extricate the robber from having to give him a share of those actual articles by giving him the cash equivalent, or does he have to take from those articles itself? Okay. Now, how is this relevant? I used the example yesterday of, say, Kevin, it's the middle of winter in Israel, and Kevin decided that he wants the entire wool because he owned it and the robber returned it to him. But the wool has grown in the robber's care, so we owe the robber something for not completely damaging his animal. But Kevin has to be compensated exactly with the value at the time of the robbery. But any improvements from that until the court date, the robber has a share according to Rabbi Shimon. According to Rav Papa's view of Rabbi Yehuda, the robber keeps the improvements entirely from the timeline of the robbery up until the court date. Now, according to the ones who say there's only a share due, do we make sure that that share is paid in cash, or share the animal, or what's the implication? There are cases where you'd rather give the guys cash. Say Kevin decides for winter, doesn't just want a beanie, but he actually wants a jersey to keep him warm. Then it's much better if he gives the robber cash for that extra wool, and he uses that entire wool to actually build an article of clothing that can be constructive rather than a beanie that just covers his ears, the top of his head. You see, guys, why you might want to extricate somebody with cash. Because you might not be left with enough of an article to do anything substantially with it when you're sharing it. Or, as I said, what happens if you're having a Shabbos meal and you've got like 6 Haredi kids, yourself and your wife, and all of a sudden you're sharing some of the proceeds of that fetus with the robber? One of your kids is going to grow hungry. And that never ends up with a pleasant Friday night. So what we do is we say it might be better to roast the full animal in the pan and give the robber his share of that fetus rather than having to give the robber that share of the meat and your other kids complaining that he's basically always treated as inferior. You accidentally call him by the dog's name. He was never really an entity in the household, and therapy and everything else. So we just want shalom bayit. So we want to get the not the rabbis out. Sorry, that was a Freudian slip. Nobody wants to kick out rabbis. Don't worry, guys. We want to get the robber out. My blood sugar's a bit low. And we're saying, can we pay him off in cash instead of giving him a share of the product? So that's what we're going to deal with now. And we resolve the inquiry from that which Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel. For 3 people, we assess the improvement that they made to the land, and we remove them from the land through paying them the amount of that assessment in cash. I'm going to explain now. A firstborn pays cash to the ordinary son for his share of the improvements of his land. A creditor pays cash to the buyer of the debtor's property for improvements that the buyer made to that property, and the creditor pays cash to the orphans of the debtor for improvements that they made to the inherited property. On the basis of this was the teaching of Shmuel. The inquiry raised by Rav Ashi was resolved. So all we want to know is, can you get out the robber, get him out of the picture by paying him cash of his share of guardianship on the profit of the improvements? Or does he have to take a share in the actual raw animal? So we're saying, how do we learn this from? Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, we're taking 3 cases in the Gemara. The first one was the improvement that they made to the land, and we remove them from the land through paying them the amount of the assessment in cash. So it seems as though you can pay we can pay the robber, Gavin, some of the money in cash instead of giving him that actual article. So Kevin can get a jersey instead of a beanie, and your 6th Haredi kid doesn't end up in therapy for being neglected, and he gets part of the Shabbos roast like everybody else. So where do we learn this from? Let's look at the first case. Is that a firstborn pays cash to the ordinary son for his share of improvements in his land. A firstborn pays cash to the ordinary son for his share of his improvements in land. Do you want me to explain to you what that means, guys? Have any of you done the Gemara at all?
No, but I understood what you just said, I think.
All right, so let me explain it in plain English. Okay. A firstborn son and his brother inherited, like, say, a field from their father, right? And they improved it before dividing it between them. Now, if you look in Bava Basra 124b, the Torah grants the firstborn a double portion of the estate. So basically, he would receive 2/3 of the field and the brother 1/3. But he doesn't receive a double portion, guys, of the improvements made to the estate after the father's death. So in other words, he does get 2/3 of the field and his brother 1/3, but the improvements, he doesn't get the double portion. They share that 50-50 each. And how do we know that? We base it on a verse on Devarim in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 17. That indicates, guys, that a firstborn receives a double portion only of the property that was available when the father died. So were there improvements when the father died? No, because the land hadn't been worked on. The brothers worked on it together. So, guys, for example, the two brothers, so they inherited a field worth 60 zuz, right? And they added 12 zuz worth of improvements uniformly throughout the field. So, in that case, we see that 40 zuz would go to the older brother of the actual field, and 20 zuz would go to the ordinary brother. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we were splitting the 12 zuz of improvements on top of the 60 zuz, and we can't say that the older brother gets 8 out of 12 and the other brother gets 4 out of 12, because the improvement has to be split evenly in 6 and 6 zuz. So what happens is that the oldest brother gets the 40 zuz, the 2/3 out of 60 zuz. He gets 40 zuz, and he gets half of the improvements, which is 6 zuz out of the 12. So he gets 46 zuz. Okay? Now, if you have a look at the younger brother, he doesn't have to be the youngest. Anybody but the oldest brother gets 1/3 of the field. So he gets 20 zuz for that actual field, plus another 6 zuz worth of the improvements, which is half that of the older brother, because that's split evenly. So in that case, he would get 26 zuz. Does that make sense in terms of the improvement? So what we're seeing here is that 2 zuz discrepancy, say it's very difficult to work out how to do it evenly with the land. Okay? Say it's not like such an easy figure to work out, but you've got this land and it's got the produce and everything else. Then what could happen is that the older brother can give the younger brother basically the 2 zuz extra in cash, because he's taking 2/3 of the land, but it's also got 2/3 of the improvement. So what's the difference between the 12 zuz, 2/3 as opposed to 1 zuz? Sorry, as opposed to 1/3? Well, if it's 12 zuz, the improvements, the older brother should get 6 zuz and the other brother gets 6 zuz. But because he took 2/3 of the property, he's actually getting 8 zuz of the improvements, which is 2/3 out of the 12 zuz. And the younger or the middle brother is getting only 4 zuz. But he has to compensate him evenly for the improvement. So what the older brother can do then, instead of trying to yank out grains of wheat, is he gives his brother 2 zuz in cash in order to be fair to his brother. Does that make sense, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Can any of you guys give it back to me?
Sure. Kevin, you going to go or you want me to go?
I'll try.
I can give it a go. Okay.
Okay, Arthur, you go first then.
Arthur, give it a go.
Okay, so what? Okay, so what you're saying there with the two brothers, the first one gets 2/3, the second one gets one third. Okay, what's left over? On any improvements, it's split 50-50. So let's say it was 100 zuz. Let's make it an easy number. It was 120 zuz. The one brother would get 80, the other brother would get 40. And if there were any improvements, let's say there was, let's say, also 120 zuz improvements. It wouldn't be 60-60. I mean, it wouldn't be 80-40. The older brother, it would be 60-60. So the brother would have to pay him 20 zuz. Older brother pay the younger brother 20. Pay the younger brother 20 zuz.
Okay, it's not.
Make the
I know
balance.
you know the concept. The reason I explained it with slightly different amounts is because I don't want I don't want people to get confused between the actual land value and the improvement value. So why I used an amount is that it's not that the oldest brother gets 2/3. It's that he actually gets a double portion compared to the other brothers. So if he's only got one brother and the land is worth 60 zuz, it looks as if it's 2/3 because he gets 40 zuz and the other brother gets 20 zuz. But he actually only earns double from the other brother. But he's not getting 2/3 and the brother's getting 1/3. He's actually getting.
Let's say if there were three brothers.
No, Arthur.
If there were three brothers.
Don't add confusion to a very simple formula. What I'm saying is the older brother, the oldest brother, let's just say there's only two, gets a double portion. The other brother gets a single portion, or the other brothers. Let's not add other brothers, so it gets complicated enough. So I'm saying if there's 60... Sorry, mate. So if there's a 60 zuz land that the father left the two sons, the older one gets double that of his younger brother. So he gets 40.
It's very easy to work out, Dan. It's very easy to work out. If there are three kids, okay, what happens is you divide by 4. You add plus 1. Okay, I'm just showing you an easy formula how to remember it, no matter how many kids you have.
You're great at maths. I'm saying I just want the other guys to understand it on the most simple basis.
So, first. Damon, so there's
before you need your thesis in abstract math theory. So what I'm saying is, guys, let's always use the simplest example first. So, Kev, you
Can I try explain it?
Please.
Okay, I may not get so if the land, is it land?
It's land. The father
land. So land's worth.
Leaves it to two.
Land is worth 100. Land is worth 60 shekels. So the older brother gets 2/3, so he gets 40, and the younger brother gets 20. Then if the improvements are 40, then they get 50% share. They get 20 each.
Generally, improvements would not be the value of the land. It hasn't.
No, they get 20 each. It's 40.
No, I get it, but it hasn't been since Jack and the Beanstalk that improvements have made that much of a difference. So he
made it 20 lower. He made it 40, not 60. He went slightly lower. He should have made it 20 though.
So Kev, let's make it where the improvement.
So where does the double come in? That's what
I'll explain. I'll explain it to you. So what we are saying is that the pasuk in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 17, implies that the double portion that the older brother gets is only on the actual land and not the improvements. So what happens is that the father leaves a parcel of land worth 60 zuz. The older brother gets a double portion, so he gets 40 zuz. The younger brother gets 20 zuz. So that's clean. Now, since the father died, the brothers work well together, despite the fact that the older brother got double the share. The younger brother was okay with it. It's written in the Torah. So he came to terms with it. They worked well together, and they made improvements of 12 zuz. Because realistically, you're never going to make improvements of the crop where it's astronomical proportions like shares. You might earn a couple of percent, but you're not going to double. It's not a Ponzi scheme. It's not Jack and the Beanstalk where there's some high nutrition AR farming or whatever it is. Okay, so we say now the improvements are 12 zuz. Now the improvements are split, generally 6 zuz and 6 zuz, because the improvements are even. Okay, pretty even. Okay, so what happens is, in an ideal world, you give the younger brother 20 zuz plus the 6 zuz improvements, and older brother 40 zuz plus 6 zuz improvements. But what we are saying here is it doesn't work like that, because when you've got a field, you're not going to sit there with tape measures and things and try and hack away at the land. You're going to say, all right, guys, this is the size of the land. The older brother gets 2/3, but the improvements on it. You're not going to start to harvest and hack the land apart. So he gets 2/3. He gives his brother a third. And what he does is, in order to pay fair with his younger brother and give him half the improvements, he reimburses him those extra, because he's now getting 8 zuz of improvements instead of 6, and the brother getting 6. He reimburses his brother those extra 2 zuz in cash, and he keeps 2/3 of the, he keeps his double portion of the land. So we're saying there is a circumstances there where it's easier that he gives his brother the cash than starts to hack away at the land. Do you get what I'm saying? It's easier to work it out than to start harvesting some of the land or whatever. So the eka here isn't that an older brother gets 2/3. It's that an older brother gets a double portion. And that portion could be halves, thirds, quarters. It doesn't matter, because as Arthur quite rightly said, there could be multiple brothers. As long as, I mean, there could be a parcel of land where there are 3 brothers, and the older brother gets half the land technically, because he gets double portion of the rest, which is on a 100 zuz parcel of land, he gets 50 zuz. The other 2 brothers get 25 zuz each, and therefore he's getting half the land. So it's not in that case he got a third of the land, 2/3 of the land, and now he's getting half. You can't think of it in terms of that. You've got to think of it that the older brother's getting double of that, and even based on the improvements. And all we are saying is that sometimes it's easier for the older brother to take his double portion of land with the improvements and reimburse his younger brother that 2 zuz in cash than to start using tape measures. That's all I'm saying, guys. That's what the Gemara is saying. That's all. Let's not get heavy with figure work. Am I making sense, Gavin, Kevin, Arthur?
Yeah.
Yeah, practically it can't. It's not. You can't divide it up as per exactly the percentages. It's impossible. It's not practical, especially when there's improvements involved.
Okay. Yeah, so let me just give you another 2 quick examples, because we've got 3 minutes left. And that improvement is a creditor pays cash to the buyer of the debtor's property for improvements that a buyer made to the property. I'll say it slowly. A creditor pays cash to the buyer of the debtor's property for improvements that the buyer made to the property. So what are we talking about here? Okay, so the debtor sells lands on which his creditor has a lien, okay? And the buyer subsequently improves the land. Now, the creditor's lien is limited to the original land and doesn't extend to the improvements. So let me give you an example, guys. If the land was originally worth 100 zuz and the buyer improved it so it's now worth 150 zuz, the creditor can't collect any more than 100 zuz from the land. So maybe you would have thought that the creditor is entitled to only 2/3 of the improved land, because it's now worth 150 zuz, and he gets 2/3 of that because that's the value, and the buyer keeps 1/3. And the Gemara Shmuel is saying, no, it's not allowed that. The creditor takes the entire field, because that's what was mortgaged to his debt, and he pays the buyer the 50 zuz in cash for his improvements. He doesn't take 2/3 and equal that amount. He gets the entire land and pays for the improvements in cash. You get it?
It's very clever, yeah.
Okay, now I've got one last example. Is that if we have a look, and a creditor pays cash to the orphans of his debtor for improvements that they made to the inherited property. So, guys, it's similar to the preceding case, right? Because the orphans inherit and improve the land that was mortgaged to their father's creditor. Okay? And the creditor's lien doesn't extend to the improvements. So if the land was worth 100 zuz and the orphans of the father that obviously owed this creditor money improved it and it's now worth 150 zuz, the creditor can't take more than 100 zuz and the orphans can't give him 2/3 of the land and keep the other third for themselves. The creditor takes the entire field, which is mortgaged to his debt, guys, and then he has to pay the orphans 50 zuz in cash for the improvements. That's the way Rashi explains it. Same as the preceding case. So, guys, why Arthur is correct is Arthur's mathematics is good, but I've got to take the dumbest approach and explain to you it's not about the oldest brother taking 2/3 or half the amount. It's not about that. He takes a double portion compared to the other brothers, and that could be a third, half, or a myriad, depending on how many brothers there are and what the value of that land's worth. But as long as you know the older brother earns double, that's the main thing. And that there's no sharing of the improved land. There has to be cash back for it in all these cases. You don't give less of the land, but it's improved so it's worth more. No, you take your share of the land and the other person is compensated in cash for the improvements. All right, guys, I hope I did all right.